Hey guys, this is kind of weird. Just looking at myself instead of my presentation this time, but that's fine. I'm doing my reaction video. The two vlogs I want to react to belong to Alex and Sarah. So I really enjoyed theirs. They both talked about two different books, which more to talk about, and they both brought up points that I thought it'd be good for me to want to expand on, right? And so Alex talked about Between Shades of Grey. No, Within These Lines, and Sarah talked about Between Shades of Grey. So one thing that I'll just hop right in, Alex. One thing that you talked about was the theme of motherhood within the book, the novel, and this is Between Shades of Grey. So you talked about how Lena's mother, I can't remember her name off the top of my head, kept them together, and Lena and her brother kept them together. But I think another thing that is worth mentioning is how she kept everybody in the I guess we would call it a community. They were in the camps, but the community within the camps that we saw, like the old man, Andreas, and his mother, up until the end at least. And that crowd, she really was a big part in not only keeping her family together and her family going through this tough time, but also the other families around them, right? I think that kind of goes for all the mothers in that novel, because we know from Stalin's to separate them and not let the men and women reproduce, therefore they would die off. But what we see in the novel is that they're separated, but they also, the women, they keep the strength, right? We actually literally have the one older man that we have is the old man, and very hateful and down in the dumps, and he's not about fighting for his life, and he's not about being strong, and which is something that the women, they display that strength that he does not display. We see in Andreas's mother that the woman also represents sacrifice. She makes this huge sacrifice of her body to give the best she can give for her son in such a horrific situation, even though that the others look down on that. Sorry, my computer's beeping at me. They also provide a sense of reasoning as well, the women do. We see through Lena's mom that she keeps she sees very grounded in the situation, right? She realizes what's happening and what's going on and what needs to be, the steps that need to be taken to for them to survive. And so when you brought up that idea of motherhood, a lot of things went through my head, and what they represent and how they distribute the strength, and then how they show the strength, and how they do distribute the strength. They do spread it out between everybody in the camps, and they provide a sense of bonding and togetherness, a sense of community in a time where there's no real life for these people, right? And I'm gonna go ahead and end there and move into Sarah's. She brought up two things that I wanted. Sarah, I should address you. Sarah, you brought up two things that I wanted to. Sorry, I just got back from dinner. You brought up two things that I wanted to touch on myself, and one of those things was you brought up Miss Roka's how she turns on the Japanese Americans, right? And then how Evelina, Miss Roka was like, how we know they're faithful to our country, and then Evelina was like, well, how did just the same as you're faithful to here, not the Italians, right? I think in both these books we see two differences in that respect, right? So you have in Between Shades of Grey, we have this bonding together of the people who are struggling, right? They come together for holidays. They celebrate holidays together. They celebrate birthdays together. They do all these in the camps, right? In the hut, they meet up in the old man's hut, and they have these parties and celebrations, and they really bond, and they get their strength from that bonding. But you brought up how the Black Dragons rose in how the Japanese Americans are in the camps that were trying to warn the camp leaders, like, hey, you should take notice of this. That was important, but what I really thought about is the differences in the novels. So I guess this goes to both of you, Alex and Sarah. I just thought it was interesting that we have one novel where in Between Shades of Grey where they bond, and then in between these lines we see the Japanese Americans while they're in the camps together. They don't get strength from each other. Of course, some do, but you have this separation where you're either faithful to the Japanese or you're either faithful to America, and if you're not faithful to the Japanese, then we'll kill you, right? That was the Black Dragons' way of looking at it, and I just thought it was interesting to have the two different separations. And of course, in Between Shades of Grey, it's a different circumstance where the people were all Lithuanian, and none of them were supporting Stalin, right? But still, it's just interesting to recognize how these, when in these troubled situations, how people react. And the Japanese Americans, they turned on each other. Not all of them, but you had a group that turned on the other side. But in Between Shades of Grey, you had this coming together, this sense of community, right? Another thing that you talked about was Evelina's criticizing of authority. We see that in several different ways. She writes letters to the newspaper. She writes essays that are critical of her country. And you brought up a good quote of hers, and I can't remember off the top of my head, but how she was like, why can't I be a proud American, but still be critical of our leaders or of our country? I think that's a very important idea, because I remember reading that and thinking, wow, that's really powerful. And then I had to think, how many people are really vocally critical of authority, and what kind of backlash do they receive? And Evelina does receive backlash. Her parents, early on in the novel when she's speaking out, her parents, or particularly her mother, was like, hey, you should watch what you say. And well, we see it in Between Shades of Grey as well, with Lena's drawings and her brothers like, hey, don't question authority. And they could see that. I didn't mean to be like, don't question authority, but that's how it was. Don't do that. And within these lines, it's really brought on. Like, even when she writes her essay, Professor Blake tells her, hey, don't write this stuff that sympathizes with the country's enemies. And I thought that was an interesting point you brought up, because how critical are we today, and especially in the youth, outside of using Twitter to at somebody or the president where we know he's not going to see it. How critical are we, or how critical is the youth of authority, and what are the ideas that, or what is the backlash to that, right? And I do think it's very important for young adults to read Evelina's questioning of authority, and how she says, yes, I can be proud, but I can still be critical. And it's not, you don't, just because you're critical doesn't mean you're against or you hate the authority. You're critical of them. You want more out of them. You want it to be better, right? I just thought those were the things that I really liked about your vlogs, and I just want to touch and expand and talk more about. Yeah, good job, guys, and thank you for watching my reaction.